Somewhere on a frozen mountainside right now, a soldier is being told to keep moving, or he will die exactly where he stands. Somewhere in a swamp infested with snakes and leeches, a trainee hasn't slept in 4 days and is being handed a tactical problem to solve before he's allowed even a single bite of food. Somewhere underwater, a man is being held down by an instructor while his lungs scream for air, and the rules say he is not allowed to fight back, not allowed to panic, not allowed to do anything except trust a process that feels designed to kill him. This is not punishment. This is not hazing gone wrong. This is training. This is how the world's most elite militaries decide, year after year, who gets to wear the badge, who gets to carry the title, and who simply isn't built for what comes next. Before we go any further, hit that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to see are the 10 deadliest, most brutal military training courses on the entire planet. And trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming. Stick around till the end, because the final course on this list has, in some recent years, claimed more lives during preparation than actual combat operations have claimed in the same units. Let's get into it. Number 10. Kapuka and the Australian Special Forces Selection Course, known simply across military circles as SASR Selection. The Australian Special Air Service Regiment doesn't advertise. It doesn't recruit with flashy commercials or glossy posters outside shopping centers. It pulls from soldiers who are already elite, men and women who have already survived years of regular army service, who have already proven themselves in conventional units, and it puts them through roughly 3 weeks of selection out in the bush that carries a failure rate north of 90%. Think about that number for a moment. These aren't civilians off the street. These are already hardened soldiers, and 9 out of 10 of them still walk away without the beret. Candidates carry rucksacks loaded past 40 kilograms across some of the harshest terrain in the entire southern hemisphere, through dense eucalyptus forest where the canopy blocks out the sky, over jagged ridgelines that seem to multiply the longer you walk, through rivers that never seem to end and that soak every piece of gear you own within the first hour. They are given almost no food, just enough calories to keep the body functioning at the most basic survival level, never enough to actually recover. Sleep becomes less of a routine and more of a rumor, something the body remembers but can no longer access. And here's the part that genuinely surprises people who've never witnessed it firsthand. The instructors don't yell. There's no screaming in your face, no dramatic theatrics like you see in movies. It's worse than that, honestly. It's silence. They simply watch you, clipboard in hand, expression completely neutral, while your body visibly breaks down in front of them. And all they're really doing is quietly noting whether your mind keeps pushing forward anyway, even after your legs have stopped cooperating. Multiple candidates have died during this selection process over the decades, mostly from heat exhaustion and severe dehydration, because the Australian outback genuinely does not care how badly you want to earn that sandy beret. It will take a life just as easily as it gives one. Those who do pass don't celebrate with fireworks or cheering. They typically just nod, exhausted beyond words, because somewhere deep down, they already suspected their body was capable of more than their conscious mind had ever given it credit for, and now they have proof. Number 9. The French Foreign Legion's commando training, conducted at Mont-Louis, deep in the rugged folds of the Pyrenees Mountains. Here's something most people genuinely don't know about the Foreign Legion, and it tends to surprise people every time it comes up. You don't have to be French to join. You don't even have to give your real name when you sign the contract. Men from broken pasts, men running from something they'd rather not talk about, men looking to completely reinvent who they are. They all funnel into this legendary unit from every corner of the globe, and the ones who want to push further, who want to earn the coveted green beret of the commando units, they get sent up into the mountains. The course blends technical mountaineering, combat swimming in frigid water, parachute operations conducted under realistic battlefield conditions, and live fire exercises, often scheduled back-to-back with almost no recovery window between any of them. Recruits scale sheer cliff faces while carrying full combat loads on their backs. They rappel down rock faces in complete darkness, trusting nothing but a rope and months of repetitive training. They conduct river crossings in water cold enough to genuinely stop a human heart if you're not moving fast enough. If your body temperature drops below the threshold your core can handle. Hypothermia isn't an occasional risk out here. It's a constant companion that walks alongside every single candidate, from the moment training begins. Injuries are treated almost as part of the curriculum rather than an interruption to it. A broken ankle doesn't automatically get you pulled from the course. It gets you a different, often equally demanding role within the exact same exercise, because the Legion's philosophy is that the mission doesn't pause just because your body has taken damage. The Legion's unofficial motto roughly translates to "March or die," and out here in the unforgiving Pyrenees, surrounded by granite and ice, that's not poetic flourish for a recruiting brochure. That's a literal, daily instruction that men live and occasionally die by. Number 8. BUD/S Hell Week, the United States Navy SEAL qualification course, held at the Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado, California. You've probably heard of this one before. It's become almost mythological at this point, partly because the Navy itself talks about it relatively openly, using it both as a recruiting tool to attract the right kind of candidate and as an honest warning to scare away everyone who shouldn't even attempt it. Hell Week consists of 5.5 days of absolutely continuous training, with a grand total of roughly 4 hours of actual sleep allowed across that entire stretch. Candidates are wet, cold, and caked in sand for nearly every single moment of those 5.5 days, with almost no exceptions. They run for miles along the beach. They swim out into the Pacific Ocean at night, in water that regularly sits in the mid-50s Fahrenheit, cold enough to induce shivering uncontrollably within minutes. And they carry rigid inflatable boats above their heads as an entire unit, while instructors scream conflicting, contradictory orders specifically designed to fracture unit cohesion and turn teammates against each other under pressure. The attrition rate during Hell Week alone typically sits somewhere between 75 and 85% of whoever managed to make it that far into the pipeline, and that's already after surviving weeks of grueling preparatory training just to even earn the right to attempt this specific week. Rhabdomyolysis, a serious medical condition where damaged muscle tissue breaks down and floods the bloodstream with toxic byproducts, sends multiple candidates to the hospital almost every single training class without fail. There's a brass bell sitting prominently on the beach near the training compound, and all a struggling candidate has to do to make every bit of the suffering stop instantly is walk over to that bell and ring it 3 times. Most people who ring it don't quit because of the raw physical pain itself. They quit because the pain doesn't seem to have any visible endpoint on the horizon, and uncertainty, far more than agony, is genuinely what breaks the human mind under sustained pressure. Number 7. The Spetsnaz GRU training programs operating across Russia, conducted at multiple classified and semi-classified facilities, with the most infamous, historically associated with the Ryazan Higher Airborne Command School. Russian Special Forces training has always operated under a noticeably different philosophy than its Western counterparts. Where American and European programs tend to emphasize psychological resilience, built primarily through prolonged exhaustion and sleep deprivation, Russian doctrine has historically leaned into something closer to controlled, direct brutality as the teaching method itself. Recruits engage in hand-to-hand combat drills that regularly result in genuine injuries, not carefully simulated ones meant for show. Sparring sessions are frequently conducted with minimal protective gear, and trainees are taught, both explicitly and implicitly, that pain tolerance is not something you discuss in a classroom. It's a skill you demonstrate through actual, real physical confrontation with another human being trying to hurt you. There are documented training exercises involving live ordnance used in disturbingly close proximity to trainees during certain drills, the underlying logic being that the genuine fear response, triggered under live fire, simply cannot be replicated through training blanks or simulated rounds, no matter how realistic the simulation technology becomes. Cold weather survival training pushes candidates deep into sub-zero forests with minimal equipment for days at a stretch, forcing them to build shelter, find food, and maintain core body temperature using whatever they can scavenge from the surrounding terrain. Information about exact fatality numbers from Spetsnaz training programs is notoriously difficult to verify given the heavy secrecy surrounding the entire program and the broader Russian military apparatus. But defectors and former trainees who've spoken publicly in interviews describe a culture where injury is simply expected as a normal part of the process, and where instructors openly, repeatedly state that the actual battlefield will be far less forgiving than anything happening on the training ground. So the training had better reflect that harsh reality as closely as possible. Number 6. Israel's Sayeret Matkal and the broader Israeli Special Forces selection process, known simply as Gibush. The word Gibush literally translates to crystallization in Hebrew, and the idea behind the name is brutally poetic when you actually understand what's happening. Under enough sustained pressure and heat, something either becomes a diamond or it shatters completely into pieces, and there is no comfortable in-between outcome. Israeli Special Forces selection compresses an enormous amount of physical and psychological stress into just a few intense days, rather than the weeks-long process used by many other countries, which sounds almost merciful on paper until you actually understand the sheer intensity packed into that shortened time frame. Candidates carry stretchers loaded with heavy sandbags, or sometimes loaded with fellow exhausted candidates, across endless sand dunes for hours at a time, without any meaningful rest. The Negev desert offers no shade whatsoever, no mercy from the elements, and temperatures that regularly climb past 40 degrees Celsius during summer selection cycles, turning every single exercise into a race against the body's own internal cooling system. There have been documented deaths during Gibush exercises over the years, including incidents involving severe heat stroke and sudden cardiac events triggered by extreme physical exertion, which eventually prompted the Israeli Defense Forces to implement significantly enhanced medical oversight protocols in more recent selection cycles. What makes this particular selection process so genuinely unique within the broader Special Forces world is the constant presence of trained psychologists embedded directly into the evaluation process itself, not merely to monitor when candidates are nearing their physical limits, but specifically to study how each candidate behaves when group dynamics within the unit start visibly deteriorating under shared stress. Israeli military doctrine places enormous, almost disproportionate weight on how a soldier treats his teammates at the exact moment when he himself is breaking down internally, because selfishness revealed under pressure ends a candidacy faster and more permanently than any physical failure ever possibly could. Number 5. Jungle warfare training conducted by various special operations units across Southeast Asia, with some of the most extreme variants run through Thailand's specialized military jungle survival schools, programs that have historically also trained foreign military personnel, including elements of both American and Australian Special Operations Forces sent for advanced certification. Jungle warfare training operates under a completely different rulebook compared to desert or mountain training, because out here, the enemy isn't simply heat or cold, it's an entire living ecosystem, actively, relentlessly trying to kill you from every conceivable direction. Recruits are taught to identify and, in some of the more advanced courses, actually consume insects, snakes, and even certain small primates as legitimate survival food, often after being deliberately starved for several days beforehand, specifically to simulate genuine desperation rather than detached academic curiosity about edible jungle creatures. Venomous snake bites during these intensive courses are unfortunately not unheard of, and the sheer remoteness of most jungle training locations means medical evacuation can realistically take several hours, sometimes considerably longer, depending on weather conditions and dense terrain that helicopters simply cannot penetrate quickly. Leeches, malaria-carrying mosquitoes, and various waterborne parasites are constant, unavoidable companions, rather than occasional, rare hazards mentioned briefly in a safety briefing. Recruits sleep in hammocks strung carefully between trees, while instructors conduct surprise night raids directly on the camp itself, specifically designed to deny any lingering sense of safety, even during officially designated rest periods, keeping the nervous system in a near-permanent state of high alert. The psychological toll of jungle training is frequently underestimated by outsiders who've never experienced it, but veterans of these intense programs frequently describe the unrelenting, suffocating humidity and the constant sensation of being silently watched by unseen creatures in the darkness as genuinely more mentally corrosive over time than any single physical hardship the course directly throws at them. Number 4. The British SAS selection course, conducted primarily across the unforgiving Brecon Beacons mountain range in Wales, a landscape that has claimed multiple lives over the decades, during training exercises alone, completely separate from any actual combat deployment. SAS selection is built around a single, brutally simple philosophy. The regiment doesn't actually train ordinary soldiers to somehow become special. It simply creates conditions extreme enough that already exceptional soldiers naturally reveal themselves through sheer performance, while everyone else quietly self-selects their own way out of the process. The course famously includes a notorious test march, known throughout military circles as the Fan Dance, a grueling climb directly up and back down Pen y Fan, the highest peak in South Wales, carrying a pack that eventually reaches 25 kilograms or more in weight, completed entirely against a strict clock and in brutal, unpredictable Welsh weather that can shift dramatically from clear sunshine to driving sleet within the very same hour. Candidates have actually died during this exact test march over the years, several of them succumbing to severe hypothermia after weather conditions deteriorated far faster than anyone anticipated, including a deeply tragic incident in 2013 that ultimately led to a formal coroner's inquest and significant, lasting reforms in how the British Army monitors candidates during extreme weather training sessions going forward. What makes SAS selection particularly punishing, beyond the obvious physical demands, is the complete and total absence of any feedback given to candidates throughout the entire grueling process. Nobody ever tells you if you're doing reasonably well. Nobody ever tells you if you're dangerously close to failing outright. You simply keep moving forward, navigating completely alone across open, exposed moorland, with nothing but a map, a basic compass, and the slowly growing suspicion that your own body might become the next name mentioned in some official incident report. Number 3. The German KSK selection process, formerly known as Kommando Spezialkräfte, widely considered by many European military analysts to be among the single most psychologically demanding programs on the entire continent. German Special Forces selection places enormous, almost singular emphasis on a specific concept called Einzelkämpfer, which roughly translates to the lone fighter, the deeply held idea that a true special operator must be fully capable of complete independent function even after every single external support system around him has completely collapsed. Candidates undergo extended solo survival exercises, lasting multiple consecutive days out in remote, densely forested terrain, with only minimal rations to sustain them, while instructors simultaneously conduct unannounced interrogation resistance drills specifically designed to simulate capture by genuinely hostile forces, complete with sensory deprivation techniques and sustained, calculated psychological pressure that systematically pushes candidates toward real, measurable breaking points. Unlike many other programs that rely primarily on raw physical exhaustion as the main filtering mechanism, KSK selection is particularly famous for its heavy emphasis on decision-making capability under extreme fatigue, with candidates regularly handed complex tactical problems to solve only after 72 consecutive hours, without any sleep whatsoever. Specifically because German military psychologists have repeatedly found through extensive research that cognitive collapse, far more than simple physical collapse, is usually the actual factor that gets soldiers killed during real combat scenarios in the field. The course maintains an attrition rate that regularly exceeds 80% of all candidates who begin it, and several candidates over the years have required hospitalization for severe dehydration and other exhaustion-related medical events, which has prompted ongoing, continuous reviews of the medical safeguards built into the broader program. Number 2. The Marine Corps Mountain Warfare and Cold Weather courses conducted at installations like the Marine Corps Mountain Warfare Training Center in Bridgeport, California, frequently cited by veterans as some of the single most physically devastating training environments found anywhere in the entire United States military, in many cases described as even more brutal than some actual combat deployments these same Marines later experienced. Cold weather warfare training subjects, candidates to sustained exposure within genuine alpine environments, where temperatures regularly plunge well below freezing for extended periods, combined with high-altitude conditions that dramatically reduce available oxygen and significantly increase the physical toll of even the most basic, routine movement across snow and ice. Frostbite is not some rare, isolated training incident here. It's a recurring, well-documented statistic that appears across nearly every single training cycle the program runs, with some cases severe enough to ultimately require partial amputation of fingers or toes in particularly extreme circumstances. Avalanche risk adds an entirely separate layer of genuine, uncontrollable danger that absolutely no amount of advanced preparation can ever fully eliminate from the equation. And there have been confirmed fatal avalanche incidents during military mountain training exercises across multiple different countries that operate similar specialized programs, including documented incidents in Europe involving NATO forces conducting joint cold weather training exercises together. What genuinely separates mountain warfare training from almost every other course featured on this list is the simple fact that the terrain itself remains actively hostile, completely regardless of what the instructors do or don't do on any given day. You can survive every single drill, follow every single instruction with absolute precision, and still ultimately be killed by a slope of accumulated snow that simply decides to move at exactly the wrong possible moment. Soldiers who manage to complete this demanding training often describe the experience less as a straightforward test of physical toughness and more as an extended, ongoing negotiation with a mountain that never actually agreed to let them survive in the first place. And finally, number 1, the deadliest military training course in the entire world, according to documented fatality rates compiled across recent decades. The High-Altitude Mountain Warfare School, operated by the Indian Army at Gulmarg in the towering Himalayas, alongside its closely associated commando wing training that specifically prepares soldiers for eventual deployment to the Siachen Glacier, widely recognized as the highest active battlefield on the entire planet Earth. Siachen sits at altitudes exceeding 20,000 feet in some of its operational zones, where the surrounding air contains roughly half the oxygen typically found at sea level, where temperatures regularly plunge to negative 50 degrees Celsius during the brutal winter months, and where soldiers stationed there have historically died from the environment itself far more frequently than from any direct enemy engagement on the battlefield. Various credible estimates suggest that across the decades-long, ongoing military presence on this remote glacier, the overwhelming majority of total casualties, by some detailed counts well over 90%, have come directly from frostbite, severe altitude sickness, sudden avalanches, and prolonged exposure rather than actual combat with opposing forces stationed nearby. The intensive training pipeline that prepares soldiers for this uniquely punishing deployment is correspondingly extreme in nearly every respect. Candidates undergo several weeks of high-altitude acclimatization training, specifically designed to identify exactly who is physiologically capable of functioning normally at such extreme elevation, because altitude sickness simply doesn't care about willpower, motivation, or sheer determination. It's a fundamental biological response that can kill even the fittest, most determined soldier within just a matter of hours if his particular body isn't built to adapt quickly enough to the thinning air. Trainees practice technical crevasse rescue, careful glacier travel techniques, and avalanche survival skills in conditions where a single misstep can genuinely mean a fall into a crevasse hundreds of feet deep. Conditions where rescue, even when it's ultimately successful, often still arrives far too late to make any meaningful difference. Pakistani forces stationed on the directly opposite side of the very same glacier face nearly identical brutal conditions, making this one of the only places anywhere on Earth where two nuclear-armed militaries maintain a permanent, continuous presence, specifically because the terrain itself is almost universally agreed upon, by both sides, to be nearly unsurvivable for any sustained period of time. Soldiers who successfully complete this demanding training and go on to actually serve at Siachen often describe an almost spiritual, profound transformation in how they personally view their own mortality afterward, because up there, genuine survival isn't measured in raw tactical skill. It's measured instead in how your lungs and your blood chemistry respond to an environment that human bodies were quite simply never biologically designed to inhabit for months at a stretch. What ties every single one of these incredibly demanding courses together, whether it's the freezing, fast-moving rivers of the Pyrenees, the sun-scorched endless dunes of the Negev, the dense, watching jungles of Southeast Asia, or the oxygen-starved, ice-covered peaks of the Himalayas, is a single shared philosophy that genuinely spans every military culture and every national tradition appearing on this list. These demanding programs are not actually designed to create strong soldiers from scratch. The soldiers walking in through the front gate are already strong, already capable, already proven in countless other contexts. These programs exist purely to identify the small percentage of human beings whose minds simply refuse to quit, even after their bodies have already presented every reasonable, logical argument for stopping completely. The instructors running these legendary courses will tell you, almost universally across every single country and culture, that they genuinely aren't looking for the biggest candidates, the fastest candidates, or even the most naturally physically gifted candidates standing in front of them. They're specifically looking for the ones who keep moving forward when there's no remaining logical reason left to keep moving at all, because that singular quality is really the only one that actually translates meaningfully to a real battlefield, where absolutely nothing ever goes according to the original plan, and where exhaustion, fear, and crushing uncertainty become permanent operating conditions rather than temporary training obstacles to simply push through and forget about. Every single candidate who manages to fully complete one of these legendary courses carries something profound with them for the entire remainder of their lives. A quiet, deeply permanent knowledge of exactly what they personally are capable of when every comfort, every excuse, and every easy way out has been completely stripped away from them. And for the candidates who genuinely don't make it through to the end, that outcome isn't necessarily a story of total failure either, because simply standing at the starting line of any single course featured on this list already places that person among an extraordinarily tiny fraction of human beings who were ever even willing to find out exactly what their own actual limit truly looked like under real pressure. If this gave you a completely new level of respect for the men and women who knowingly walk into these brutal courses, already understanding exactly what's waiting for them on the other side, drop a comment below and let us know which single course on this entire list genuinely shocked you the most. And if you haven't already done so, make absolutely sure you're subscribed, because there are powerful stories, exactly like this one, waiting for you every single week. Stories about the rare people who actually do the things the rest of us only ever get to read about from a safe distance.